It is a special privilege this evening to confer upon a most worthy recipient, Sir Salman Rushdie, the inaugural Robert J. Zimmer Medal for Intellectual Freedom. Sir Salman's challenging and transformative novels have been recognized as among the greatest literature of our era.
It is my honor and my personal pleasure, on behalf of the board of the American Academy of Sciences and Letters, to present you with the 2023 Robert J. Zimmer Award, medal, actually, for academic freedom.
Thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations. I'm so glad you're the first recipient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
All right.
So it's a real honor and privilege to be here tonight. Salman is a very dear personal friend, and it is a blessing that you're alive, you're with us. I also want to highlight that Sir Salman's wife, Rachel Eliza Griffiths, who is with us here tonight, played an extremely important role in his survival. And I want to acknowledge her and also say that she's an eminent novelist and poet in her own right. So we don't have very much time.
Okay.
And I would like to ask you about several things. One is that you received an award recently in Germany, and you have this wonderful passage, and in fact, it's a speech that was then republished in the New Yorker. And I'd like to read one passage from that, if you don't mind, and ask you to comment on it and to expand on it. Mm-hmm. So this is Sir Salman in his speech in Frankfurt. What do we do about free speech when it is so widely abused? We should still do, with renewed vigor, what we have always needed to do, to answer bad speech with better speech, to counter false narratives with better narratives, to answer hate with love, and to believe that the truth can still succeed even in an age of lies. We must defend it fiercely and define it as broadly as possible. So yes, we should of course defend speech that offends us. Otherwise, we are not defending free expression at all. Let 1,001 voices speak in 1,001 different ways.
You know, sometimes things that seem obvious become things that people argue about. And that seems to me to be a statement of the obvious. And yet now it's kind of quite contested. You know? And I'll just tell you a story which illustrates what I was trying to say. Back in the bad old days, after the attack on the Satanic Verses, there was a movie made in Pakistan about me. I was the bad guy. The film was called International Guerrillas, International Guerrille. They were the heroes. Their job was to kill me, obviously. And at the end of the film, I did get killed, but not by them, by the Quran appearing in the sky and shooting thunderbolts at me. So killed personally by the intervention of the Almighty. I thought there's dignity in that. Anyway, this dreadful film they wanted to get a license to show it in England, and the British Board of Film Classification, whose job it is to give certificates to films, were legally advised that it would be dangerous for them to certify the film because I could sue them for libel as well as the filmmakers. I didn't know quite what to do because here I am fighting a battle against censorship, and I'm about to be defended by an act of censorship.
Yes.
And I had, fortunately, good advisors, and they said that I should intervene on behalf of the film. So I wrote a letter to the board giving up my right of legal recourse. And the film was given a license, and immediately it failed dreadfully. Why? Terrible film. And no matter what people might have thought about me or not about me, nobody wanted to spend their $10 to watch a terrible film. Now, if I had not done that and the film had been banned, it would have acquired the glamour of taboo.
Yes.
And it would have been watched on cheap videotapes behind closed curtains all over the country, and its power would have been enormously magnified. By letting the light shine on it, people could just see it's garbage, and it disappeared. So it showed me something about trusting the audience. You know, let people see what you disagree with, what is actually deeply hostile to you, and let them make up their own minds, because actually most people are sensible. And not everybody wants to waste $10. So I learned from that.
Yes.
You know, this lesson about let 1,000 voices speak, you know. And in the free speech field, you find yourself constantly defending stuff that you really don't like. You defend it not as itself, but for its right to be.
Yes.
You know, and I think if we give up that principle, we're losing something very, very important. If we can't trust ourselves as a culture to accommodate ideas that we don't like, then our ideas lose their value as well, because they become authoritarian. You can't have one set of ideas given authority over another, you know, even though you often think you'd like to. It needs to be avoided.
Yes. You have been very involved actually with PEN, the organization PEN.
Yes.
And it's played a very important role in the lives of many writers. No,
yeah, well, you know, there's PEN is a many-headed monster. I mean, there are PEN organizations in different countries with different degrees of funds and ability to function. And then there's International PEN, which is this sort of umbrella organization. And PEN America actually is probably the best funded of all the PEN groups, and therefore is able to be more active, to take on more stuff. Yeah, I mean, put it like this, when I was attacked, PEN America was enormously active in my defense. And it mattered a lot to me to hear those voices raised on my behalf. And so then, I mean, it's now, whatever, I came to live in America in 2001. And I thought, you know, time to pay it forward. If that was done for me, it's now time for me to join in to do it for other people. And PEN is one of the leading organizations that does that for writers in trouble, you know. And the thing I've always thought is that literature is very powerful and enduring. You know, the writers, not so powerful, not so enduring.
yes.
So, you know, the poet Ovid was exiled by Augustus Caesar to this dump on the Black Sea. Spent his life pleading to be allowed to come back to Rome, but never allowed to do so. Poetry of Ovid has outlasted the Roman Empire. The poet Garcia Lorca was murdered by the thugs of Franco's Phalange. The poetry of Garcia Lorca has outlasted the Phalange. So on, you know. Literature is powerful. Writers are fragile. And so for an organization like PEN, yes, of course, we need to defend literature itself, but we actually need to defend the writers because they're more vulnerable. And that's what we try to do, you know. And I was president of PEN for a while. I was proud of that. And on the other hand, being ex-president is a much better job, as many people in this city will know.
So I'm curious, you know, when you were attacked, and actually both when the Satanic Verses came out, but also even when this terrible incident happened. And by the way, I should add that, you know, when this terrible event happened, it was another Lebanese American who came onto the stage. This Lebanese American loves you, so there's nothing to worry about.
Okay, no, I have some Lebanese American friends, one or two.
So when the first time and then more recently, many people came to your support, but some did not.
Yeah.
And that must have been either surprising or painful or...
Well, back then, back in 1989, when the attack first happened, there were quite a lot of people who were willing to blame me, you know, for having made trouble. And this time round, I think because I actually got hurt, there's been less of that. So that's what you have to do. You have to get actually seriously injured for people to be on your side. But, you know, the level of support even then was pretty remarkable, you know, and I appreciated it, and it mattered to me and strengthened me, helped me. And this time, I mean, this tidal wave of affection was very important.
And did you feel that the support came from across the ideological spectrum, or was it more
Yeah,
on...
no, it did, this time, yes. I don't know, I mean, I didn't ask for the political orientation of people sending me letters of friendship.
Yeah.
But I mean, I assume it was some of everybody, yeah.
And you've written, I just want to briefly mention that you've actually...
No, I've written, yeah, I mean, I had to write something about it because I needed to do that in order to get past it, you know. And so I've written this short book, which will come out in the spring. And come back and talk about it then.
Good. I'll just give you a hint. It's called Knife.
It's called Knife. Yeah. I mean,
but well done. I mean, it's a good thing that you should write as a way of responding to this.
yeah, I mean, it just felt necessary, you know. And it would have seemed silly to write something that had nothing to do with it. Just, you know, that's to use the cliche, that's like ignoring the very large elephant in the room.
And today, seeing, you know, how contentious, not just politics, but, you know, commentary of various kinds, and as you point out in your speech in Frankfurt, that it's both from the left and from the right. Mm-hmm. What would you tell a young author? What would you say to them about this present moment that we're in?
I would tell them to ignore it and write what you have to write. You know, I mean, I always say to students, I say, if there's a way you can find of not writing a book, don't write it. Because, you know, there are enough books. None of us in our lifetime will read all the great books that there are to read already. So if you can find a way of not adding to that mountain, don't add to it. The only reason to write is because you cannot avoid doing so. It's because the book feels so necessary to you, not to the world, to you, that you have to write it. Those are the books to write. All other books, forget about it.
So in a sense, we write for ourselves.
For ourselves first. You know, I mean, I think, obviously, you have a sense of you have a hope of an audience. And I mean, if I'm writing, I have something sitting on my shoulder, looking over my shoulder at what I'm doing. But I think that's probably just a version of me that's sitting over there. I mean, I'm very keen to have readers. I really like readers.
Yes.
But, you know, the great thing about readers is that they're of all different kinds. Ages, races, classes, etc. So it's impossible to say I'm writing for that reader because there's too many different kinds of readers. So the gamble of writing is that you do something in the privacy of your room as a kind of private act, you know, and then it becomes a public act, and you just hope people find something worthwhile in it, you know. And if they do, it's great, and if they don't, it's your fault. So I mean, it's a gamble, you know. It takes a long time to write a book and a very short time for it to be dismissed. So you just hope that's not going to happen. You know, and actually, most of the time as a writer, I've been quite lucky in that from my second novel, I managed to find quite a wide readership. And it's given me a good life, with one exception. But even that exception, you know, I mean, actually, The Satanic Verses is a novel that, until this attack on me, it had begun to be possible to read that book just as a book. You know, not as a kind of scandal or hot potato or whatever, but just as a novel. And some people loved it and some people didn't, and some people were somewhere in the middle. And that's kind of like the ordinary life of a book.
Yes.
You know, and it finally was beginning to be able to have that life. And now I guess it's that been delayed or confused again by this attack. But I hope it gets back to that, because that's what I want for it. I just want it to be a book amongst all my books.
I'm not keeping track of time, but I will just say one last thing. So I reread your autobiography, which is a wonderful book. And in it, you make this important point, which is that, in fact, the Satanic Verses is in no way an attack on the prophet or religion, but it was used politically to sort of, in fact, against its actual message for political purposes.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the unifying things for all the people who led the attack on the Satanic Verses is that they had not read it.
So tragic.
I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini was on his deathbed and not in the habit of reading 600-page novels in the English language.
Yes.
Never saw a copy, as far as we know. And a lot of the other people who joined in the attack also had that. And I used to be really annoyed by that. You can understand.
Of course.
And then it occurred to me that actually, if you look at the attacks on works of literature, they're almost always conducted by people who haven't read them. You know, I mean, most of the people who attacked James Joyce's Ulysses as pornographic had clearly not read Ulysses. Because, you know, James Joyce was a genius in many ways, but his ability to arouse sexual desire is probably not one of his great skills. People who accused Nabokov's Lolita of being, you know, pro-pedophilia had obviously never read that extraordinarily moral book. You know, and then I began to think maybe not reading a book is a condition without which you can't attack it.
Yes.
If you actually go to the trouble to read a book, it's difficult to attack it in the same way. So I thought, okay, well, I mean, that's a good club to be in.
Indeed.
You know?
Indeed.
And now people read it, and quite often people say to me two things about the Satanic Verses. One, they say, who knew that it was funny? And I say, well, people who read it knew that it was funny. And the other thing they say is, what was the problematic bit?
Yes.
I say, well, exactly.
Yes.
You know, because a lot of the so-called problematic bits are actually not there at all. You know, and so this book that was attacked, in a way, didn't exist, except in a sloganized, politicized form. You know? And that's why I'm saying it's nice now that people can begin to read it for the book that actually is there, rather than the one that was made up by its enemies. There we are. I mean, I'm not the only writer to whom this has happened. You know, we were talking about pen. I mean, one of the things we do is we find that writers around the world are being attacked in this way. You know, the great Egyptian Nobel laureate Najib Mahfouz was stabbed in the neck by somebody who disapproved of his work.
Yes.
And so I'm by no means the first or the only one, you know, but I'm still here.
Indeed. I just want to end by saying, please keep telling us stories. Please remain, you know, who you are.
No, please, thank you. I mean, I feel in a way under false pretenses. I feel like I'm somebody who makes up stuff for a living, forced into a kind of non-fictional world. and actually, I just like to get back to what I actually do.
Sir Salman Rushdie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.